Good morning and welcome to Chris & Co, the show looking at what affects business in Kent. With me, Chris Price. Joining me today are Jane Ollis, Chairman of the Kent branch of the Institute of Directors, and Kevin Attwood, Chairman of the Kent County Show and a delegate at the National Farmers Union. Throughout the show, they'll be discussing the impact on business of Britain's vote to leave the European Union. Although Kent voted out, a number of polls indicated the county's business community were in favour of remaining in the single market. Our reporter Adam Devaney found out more.
Nearly 2 weeks ago, Kent cast its vote with the rest of the country and voted almost unanimously to leave the European Union. Within a matter of hours, the ripple effects could be seen. The pound fell by over 30% to the dollar, and FTSE 100 businesses declined in value by over 3%. But what does this mean for the businesses on our high streets? Is it all doom and gloom? I spoke to Glenn Thomas, a tax partner at accountancy firm MHA McIntyre Hudson, based in Maidstone.
A lot of people will be worried about retaining access to the open market, but in order to do that, I think a lot of the US or the EU regulations will still be very, very much applicable if we want to go into that market. So how we negotiate the final EU exit is yet to be seen. A lot of our clients do export to the European Union.
Since the EU referendum, there have been political resignations across all parties. David Cameron stepped down as Prime Minister, and most of Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet have resigned. This has left Britain's two major parties mostly divided. Britain's most passionate Brexiter, Nigel Farage, has stepped down as UKIP leader. This has left us without a leader to head the Article 50 negotiations. So what are business people supposed to do to protect themselves against this uncertainty?
They should be undergoing sensitivity analysis, putting together some robust cash flow projections to see whether or not they have the power or the strength of business to actually get themselves over a downturn.
Life outside the EU is new territory, though all one can do is speculate at how our high streets will look in the years to come. Adam Devaney for KMTV.
So, Jane, you represent thousands of members at the IOD. What are their views about Britain's decision to leave the EU?
Well, a snap poll was done the weekend after the referendum results, so it's when people were still feeling quite raw, I think. But at that time, the majority, so about 60% of IOD members, felt it was going to have a negative impact. But at the same time, well over a third of them said, we're going to keep hiring, we're going to keep doing business as usual. I think since that time, people have had a chance to reflect, think what's happening, and a nice example is from Sian Holt from the Fudge Kitchen, one of Kent's sort of leading food manufacturers and retailers, and she says business as usual. They're continuing to pursue purchase contracts across Europe, don't see any impact on their business, and let's just carry on and make Kent a great place to do business.
Kevin, Brexit has caused political uncertainty like we've almost never seen before, really. What kind of impact does the uncertain landscape have on businesses, really of all sectors, I guess, really?
Well, it is all sectors, but if we come back to the farming community, agriculture really is one of the key policy areas in Europe. And very much we've probably relied for 40 years on that policy being made in Europe and how it affects our industry in this country. And that's reflected really all the way through from civil servants and DEFRA, because although they've been a department of government that's meant to be dealing directly with agriculture in practice, most of our regulations, most of the policy has been created in Brussels. So when we talk about uncertainty of all the industries we've got in this country, without a doubt agriculture is one of the ones which will face the most uncertainty. Looking forward, it really depends on the shape of the package as we leave Europe, and obviously we're not even a fortnight into that scenario at the moment. We don't even know who's going to be leading the country in 2 months' time, and we don't know their position on how to approach those negotiations. And one of the things that's quite obvious is that we haven't really negotiated trade agreements anywhere in the world or with Europe for 43 years. So that's a whole skill set which is probably missing from the departments of government and the civil service. So when we actually take it all the way back down to my industry and what's going to happen to my industry on the ground, well, a key aspect of it is retaining access to the single market, which is probably common to most of the businesses in the country, really. How that pans out in terms of certain specifics, one of the key things for here in Kent, our horticultural industry, there's a big presence in Kent of actual apples, pears, top fruit, soft fruit, going through into herbs and very much the lettuce type products. Well, key to that is access to labour, and what we do know is one of the determining factors in how people voted in the referendum was the migrant labour aspects and EU labour coming into this country, as well as actually non-EU labour. But one of the fundamental aspect for those businesses will be access to labour. If we look across different aspects of the farming industry, obviously livestock, 40% of the land we produce goes into Europe, Spain particularly, and France. So if we look at the livestock industry, we really are wondering where that product is going to go in 2 to 4 years' time.
Sure. Jane, there's been this huge uncertainty that's been created. One of the things that is still the same is the Bank of England. I wonder if there's anything that businesses are hoping that the Bank of England could maybe do to try and mitigate some of the concerns that we've got.
I think Mark Carney's role is just about reinforcing business as usual, ensuring that the financial markets are kept stable, because that obviously creates a lot of anxiety amongst business owners, because what we don't want to have is investment decisions put off, delayed, contracts deferred, moved elsewhere. So his leadership role throughout this is key, and I think he's demonstrated that he's stepped up to that well over the last few weeks, of all the chaos that we've seen. The Bank of England are there to do precisely what they've done, which is provide stability and a very clear message out to business, which is, come on guys, let's just keep going. We're resilient, we're resourceful, and we actually tend as Brits to actually deal quite well in terms of crisis. And a good business to me is one that always deals with change, always manages uncertainty, and that ability makes great successful businesses.
Are there things then that you think that businesses can gain from this decision?
Well, I'm always a girl who's about finding a positive in every situation. So for me, what are the opportunities that presents? At the moment, you've got sterling, which has obviously fallen in value. So if you are trading with other countries at the moment and you've got export, then actually you're probably going to do quite well because you're going to get better value for your goods. And in the longer term, if you're looking at exporting and you're just exporting into Europe, why not look at different markets as well? It's a perfect time to be doing that. You've got government support through UKTI, which is free and available to Kent businesses. And so my advice is be resourceful, have a think about where you can find unique places to place your products and services, and get on with it.
Sure, brilliant. Right, well, both of you, thanks very much for just starting us off there. So now let's look at the way Brexit will affect the county's farming community. Under the EU's Common Agricultural Policy, farmers receive subsidies to protect the continent from food shortages in the event of business getting tough for growers. That will disappear not long after the nation triggers Article 50, the process of exiting the single market. Henry Sandercock looks at the numbers for us.
No matter where you look, agriculture dominates the Kent countryside. Vineyards, orchards and the occasional pig farm can all be found here in the Garden of England. But in the post-Brexit world, could this all be about to change? Leaving the EU could see UK farmers lose access to the single market, as well as subsidies like the Common Agricultural Policy, which currently makes up 55% of farmers' incomes. It could also see a sea change in the regulation of agricultural products. Take, for example, apples. Under current EU regulations, apples can only be sold if they're free from any abnormal external moisture. However, if Britain were to leave the single market, these rules would no longer apply. Farmers are set to perform an increasingly important role in society. EU figures project that as the population hits 9 billion in 2050, food needs will increase by 60%. When you put this next to forces such as climate change, here in the UK, we'll just have to hope that the South East can remain as the breadbasket of the nation. This is Henry Sandercock reporting for KMTV.
Kevin, what are farmers saying then about the future without the Common Agricultural Policy?
Well, the Common Agricultural Policy has always been designed to secure food security within Europe and effectively within the UK as well. And it's been designed so that we maintain the ability to produce food through the vagaries of global production peaks and troughs. As it happens at the moment, we're at a point where global production of most of the commodity grains is at a peak. So world supplies, there's copious supplies of wheat, oilseed, soya. So we're very much at a low point in prices worldwide. So if you did take away the element of support right at this moment, you will undermine a lot of businesses in terms of farming. And farming isn't actually something you switch on or switch off. It is a long-term production process. So if you were in milk, you've built up a dairy herd over many, many years. If we're talking about apples, well, they're planting orchards with a 10-year, 20-year production life. Similarly, vineyards going in at the moment. And even in my industry, my part of the industry where we're growing wheat, well, we plant it, it's 12 months growing it, we might be 12 months further on selling it. So all of these things are long-term, and very much you need a long-term structure for that. So the Common Agriculture Policy has very much been about ensuring there's a production pace in Europe to produce food and ensure security. So obviously we're at a low point in world prices, so if you take away support mechanisms at the moment, you will probably see structural change in agriculture. And if you do it relatively quickly on a 2-year horizon, bearing in mind the timescales I've just mentioned, you will see very rapid structural change in the UK farming industry. And that will have effects. We mentioned a moment ago sheep industry, livestock. Well, at the moment, without support, the whole of that part of the industry just does not economically stack up. And that's the part of the industry that gives you the grazed landscapes across vast areas of the countryside. It is the green fields and hedges. But similarly, all of the other things we see in Kent, if you undermine that long-term security of production, you will see those things change. So very much in Europe, the process and the support mechanisms have been really aimed at a sort of structure that we've got at the moment as being perhaps not ideal, but where they want to be. And if we step outside of that, we will change. And if that's something that government and our country think should happen, it will happen.
Many farmers, perhaps, I wonder, find themselves in a bit of a strange situation, because before the referendum, many farmers who I spoke to seemed to say with their hearts they were outers with regulations and so forth, but with their heads they were remainers with access to subsidies, migrant labour, whatever. Do you think that deep down maybe some farmers did actually want Brexit?
I'm absolutely sure they did, and if we look at the numbers where we were actually looking at polling within the NFU, clearly there was a significant percentage, probably something around 30%, who were in favour of Brexit. And it is about regulation. But when we leave Europe, and depending on the circumstances, if we're still trading with their single market, we will still have regulation. So the situation is something that will develop over 2 to 4 years probably.
Sure. Jane, I just have to very give you the opportunity to say, I mean, do you think that maybe farmers have had it a bit of both ways here? Maybe they need to sort of wake up to the real world of, they've had subsidies for such a long time. They've had access to migrant labour at a favourable cost. Do you think maybe farmers now need to sort of come into the real world a bit? I don't know.
I don't know. I think the farming is a tough business to be in. It's a very uncertain business, and when you've got a highly regulated and a business that's supported by any sort of tariffs, that creates a lot of problems. I'd love to see farming in Britain grow. I'd love to see us producing more, growing more that we produce, rather than having to import. I don't know, what are the percentages, Kevin, of food that's imported into the UK?
Well, we only really grow about 62% of the food we consume in the UK.
So is that an opportunity, actually? Can we use this as a way of growing again British farming and encouraging more people to come back into farming and see this? And I think that needs a lot of support by government to do that and to ensure that we've got a nice regulatory environment.
Sure. Okay. Well, both of you, thank you very much. We've run out of time. Thanks very much for coming to the show. And that's it for the latest edition of Chris & Co, our show looking at the issues affecting business in Kent. You can keep up to date with the county's latest business news at kentbusiness.co.uk. And you can follow us on Twitter at kentbusiness and join our pages on Facebook and LinkedIn. Thanks for watching. Have a very good day. Bye-bye.